If you thought Big World Big Adventures the movie was controversial, wait till you see what season 22 is like. The first in a new era in Thomas and Friends history.
Oh boy, I sure am super pumped for this one. Rachel, Mike, Matt, you guys ready for this one? Because I sure as sugar am.
I'm ready to go for this. I'm really excited.
I'm ready!
Me too. Just think of the fun we'll have then.
Oh, I'm ready alright. God help me.
Matt, are you okay?
I'm fine. I just have a how can I say it? Awkward relationship with the season.
I'm sure you could do it, Matt. We could all get through this together.
Of course. Okay, Zack, start us off, please.
Now, we're going to be reviewing the episodes in sections. The first will be the international episodes, organized by country. The second section will be the solo portion, the one that everybody wants to see, am I right? They'll be reviewed based off the Australian air dates rather than the United Kingdom air dates.
Much as I am honoured to have the episodes all aired down here, it does puzzle me as to why they weren't all released in the UK first.
So, what episodes are we talking about?
The first episode we'll begin with is...
Number 1 engine.
Thomas has a race with Onge, another tank engine who's just like him. Not a bad start to the international episodes, let alone season 22 as a whole, but the plot of this episode is very akin to Thomas's Shortcut, except based in China, and with Onge in Birdie's place.
That's true enough, Zack, but I still enjoyed this one. The characters shown in Onge and the coaches that Thomas was running with are good foils to Thomas and even to Annie and Clarabelle, even though they aren't in this episode apart from the fantasy sequence.
Now this episode I would think is quite okay for me the first time I saw it even, but in that episode we can clearly see that Thomas still has his racing and competitive spirit within him since we last saw him in Big World Big Adventures. And to be honest, I kinda wish he would just at least drop it. Doesn't he even know that this could land him into trouble? But not only that, we get to see those 2 new coaches that Rachel just mentioned. It was quite a nice touch, but I could only imagine what Annie and Clara would think if they caught him cheating on them. Isn't that really so wrong? Huh?
As for the coaches, their names are An, and Yunlong. They basically are the Annie and Clarabelle of China. Now, I know they don't entirely have the same personality traits as them, but that's all I have to say for who they are.
I don't know, Matt. An and Ling Yon seem more mischievous than Annie and Clarabelle to me.
Really? How do you reckon, Rach?
They did get Thomas to take a shortcut when Annie and Clarabelle were against the idea in Thomas's shortcut.
Ah, now I get it. And I do see the point. And yes, him taking the shortcut was a bad idea. But why? Well, for one, the tracks were twisted and had a lot of sharp corners in it too. I mean, I don't know why I question the logic in that part of the episode, but come on. You just can't help but question the logic in that, can ya? I mean, could we even see him falling off the cliff? I know it's morbid, but it's true to see that kind of bends the logic. Get it? Bends? Because of those bendy tracks?
I don't get it.
Yeah, me neither.
Oh, come on, guys, that's comic gold!
Yeah, leave it to the real comic geniuses.
Well, hang on a minute. I haven't given my thoughts yet.
Oops, sorry about that.
For a season premiere, as well as the first non-Sodor episode in the series, this was interesting. I liked Thomas' surprise when he found that he wasn't the only number 1 engine in China, and Onge is similar to Thomas in that they're both blue tank engines, they both have the number 1 paint on their sides, and they both love to race. Think they should try to race with Rainbow Dash Cam?
Aw, you put me in a spot again!
Maybe your pony OC will be racing with them too.
I wish.
Now this is going to be a common thing throughout season 22, but I'll say it right here. In each episode, one character, be it Thomas or someone else, will have a fantasy sequence that relates to the episode in some way. In Thomas's fantasy, he imagines himself, Annie and Clarabelle jumping over the Vickerstown Bridge and over the moon with Sir Topham Hatt's face. Unless I'm mistaken, that looks like a reference to the iconic Steven Spielberg movie, E.T. the Extraterrestrial.
And trust me, the fantasy sequences will quickly get old.
I think the fantasy sequence is very in quality. Next episode, Zack?
Okay, so is number 1 engine a sign of better things to come, or does it get worse from there? Let's find out.
Thomas and the Dragon.
Thomas thinks he's bringing a real dragon to the Chinese New Year celebrations. This one left me with a weird feeling when watching it for the first time. I mean, did they suddenly forget that Thomas had seen a Chinese dragon before? Like, say, Thomas Percy and the Dragon?
That episode was so long ago. Back in season 3, that is.
Yeah, way back that episode was.
And even then, the Chinese dragon wasn't even real. It was made out of paper.
Well, to be fair, it's possible he might have forgotten about the incident. Not only that, how many kids are going to remember what that episode was?
Other classic episodes have been referenced in the modern era. I just felt like it was a missed opportunity, that's all.
I know what you mean, Rachel. Since 2015, I've been yearning for a sequel to The Adventure Begins that wasn't made by a few fans. And since Brenner had left the show in August of 2018, I doubt that's going to happen anytime soon, if at all. So I suppose classic series references are better than nothing.
I was kind of hoping to get a Scarlowi-centered adaptation of the books in the correct order, but that doesn't seem likely now.
I find that to be very sad. I wouldn't have minded seeing a sequel, but again, it's pretty much wishful thinking there.
But we're getting off topic. Back to Thomas and the Dragon without Percy.
I thought it was a pretty funny episode. Probably my favorite of the international episodes so far, especially Young Bao's little joke with Thomas.
I just honestly have no words as to what I really think about this episode, but the one thing I can safely say is that it somehow teaches the children of this generation that this is the kind of holiday that the people of China would celebrate. Also, does anyone have any thoughts about when Thomas was chased down by an actual dragon? To me, part of me thinks it's cool, but they must have taken Thomas's fear of it a little bit too much.
I do admit, I've become more lenient toward this episode over time, but that factor still bothers me a little.
Let's just move on.
Runaway Truck.
After a mishap with an accident-prone van, Yong Bao teaches Thomas the art of Tai Chi. Now this episode teaches Thomas the art of Tai Chi, obviously, but when we see Yong Bao teaching him just that, it felt like he hasn't even learned a thing. I mean, we see Thomas watching it as to what he has to do, but he kept on failing every time. Seriously, how can he even screw up like that so easily every time? Seriously, how many times?
Maybe it's a force of habit? I mean, engines usually push their rolling stock if they're shunting.
Maybe, but you can see that Yong Bao actually did it carefully, whilst Thomas just straight up charges at the poor truck. Wait, what was his name again?
Just a moment, Cam. I'll check the wiki. Lee is the van's name.
Lei, huh? That's a short name.
I didn't see any problems with this episode. I thought it was great. In this section thus far, I like the dynamic between Thomas and Yong Bao. The latter feels a bit like a Chinese Edward, not the recolor, mind you. I even like how culture is implemented into the story very seamlessly, and also pays off with the message at the end.
Now you mention it, Zack, I guess the episode is pretty good. I did like Thomas and Yong Bao interacting, and Lee's pretty interesting. Learning something new is also pretty tricky, so I can understand Thomas's struggle.
Yeah, I kinda do see it, but with Thomas failing to learn Tai Chi every time, it still kinda bothers me.
Remember how I said that characters from that 2016 special weren't just a marketing ploy to sell toys? Well, to an extent, I was right. Like Zack said, Yong Bao is basically a Chinese Edward, personality-wise at least.
Don't you have anything to say about this one, Matt?
I've got nothing.
Alright, next episode, here we come!
Thomas in the Wild.
Thomas tries to find some pandas in the Chinese wilderness. Ah,
You said it, Matt. I just have no words for this episode, but I can brief you in on what it's about. Basically, Thomas is sent to take some photographers to take some pictures of some pandas. But this episode, in my opinion, just feels more boring and Three Steam Engines gruff. An episode that nearly felt so empty!
Not to mention, this episode brings back one of the worst elements from the Dark Era. Don't know what I'm talking about? I'll tell you. The Free Strikes formula!
It's not the worst episode this season in my book. The animals are cute and all, but it just seems to drag on. If you're looking to take a nap, this episode is the one to play in the background, guys.
The only thing that was remotely enjoyable was that fantasy sequence with the black and white teddy bear, but even that wasn't enough to make this episode entertaining.
One word for this episode: boring.
Finally! Somebody agrees with me on this one. Next episode!
The water wheel.
Thomas transports a water wheel made of bamboo. And that's it. Remember Steady A from season 12? That's pretty much this episode set in a different country. That's all I've got.
The last episode was a drag, but this one? This is weird. The water wheel just bounces all over the place for a good few minutes while Thomas is chasing it all over China. And it ends up being delivered in the river. Okay, then?
Yeah, that's one way of putting it. I mean, him chasing down a bouncing water wheel made of bamboo? It feels like they're really trying here, but my god, just look how stupid it looks! How can a water wheel made of bamboo bounce so perfectly up hills? Yeah, I know, that's me questioning the logic of this episode again. Probably the second time I did so this review.
Honestly, if we were to question logic with every single episode, we'd be here until the end of the month.
That I wouldn't want.
I honestly have very little to say here. Since Emily Saves the World or Steady Eddie set in China, it just feels like it tries too hard to be funny and nothing else. Also, how does United Nations' goal about saving water relate to this episode?
Beats the heck out of me.
Yeah, that ending segment with Thomas confused me big time. I know we didn't mention it in the other episodes, but here I think it needs to be addressed.
Meh, I just don't even care about that.
I guess India's next on the agenda.
Why not?
Alright.
Trusty Trunky.
On his first day in India, Thomas gets rescued by an elephant. Now we travel to India, a realm where we once again get to see Ashima, and she hasn't even changed a bit. Still the prettiest Indian engine anyone can set eyes upon.
And one of my favorite characters in the whole series. Sure, Ashima's no Emily, but I'm cool with that.
Well, she's sweet and all, but just don't mention that to Zack.
Oh crap! I forgot about that! I remembered what happened last time!
Not this again.
My fam, back up slowly.
There is very little happening throughout this episode. It's just exposition after exposition and it leads to Thomas being rescued by an elephant. Why the hell are they making him the lead character in the episodes? Let someone like Onge take the lead role for goodness sake. We have to make him interesting too. And here, Thomas isn't. Actually, now that I think about it, nobody in this episode is interesting personality-wise, except for Rajiv, who feels like an Indian James. Because of that, this episode is boring.
I would think that this episode is a bit okay in plain speaking, but that one scene in that episode that I find weird was that imagination cloud of elephants working on the railway. Here we see Thomas, Percy and Emily all placed on the desk with the fat controller that has a face of an elephant. Now that imagination scene was very weird. Weird with a capital W.
Thomas the Tank Engine, you've come in on the wrong platform. You're causing confusion and delay. Watch where you're going.
It is kind of a weird fantasy, but I find another fantasy in another episode pretty funny. We'll come to that later.
Thomas goes to Bollywood.
Thomas dreams about having a role in a Bollywood movie. And this is the first time this episode we're gonna get a bit of controversy.
How so, Mike?
Well...
Finally! An episode in this season that's actually good!
Ah, finally! I found something that's worse than Free Steam Engine's gruff.
Oh, that's done it.
Oh dear. Mike, do you know where you put those whistles?
Yeah, 1 second. Be right back.
Thomas Goes to Bollywood is something I don't normally encounter, even in the midst of the worst and most unwatchable episodes of the entire show. I guess objectively, other episodes are worse, but I'm calling this the worst of season 22 because it shouldn't even qualify for this series. It's not a Thomas episode, it's a knockoff of a Thomas episode. This is a direct-to-DVD movie that somehow got released in theaters. It has the lack of nutrition of store-bought candy, but none of the flavor. It's the already been chewed gum of Thomas episodes. episodes. Everything else relating to our little blue friend in 2018, the crappy half-assed unfinished wood toys, the Twitter YouTube drama, the bad morals and apology impossible, more on that later. None of it measures up in badness to this. This is a Thomas episode in the same way a YouTube series is a TV show, and it is...
Excuse me? I'll have you know that Thomas Goes to Bollywood is one of the best international episodes to date!
There's only been one season so far of the international episodes, but that's beside the point.
I'm guessing the reason why you hate this episode is because of this little sequence?
Only one engine can save the day.
Thomas the Tank Engine! You're a hero!
I'm just being really useful, Mom.
It's one of the only two fantasy sequences in the whole season that I found great. Unlike you.
No, it has nothing to do with the fantasy sequence. The whole damn thing is a maximum catastrophe of scrap.
Is not. For your information, the episode was actually really good.
Yeah, if you actually want an episode that completely lacks story and personality, and a message pulled out of the ass.
More like you're pulling things out of your ass.
I have not seen an episode 7 minutes long this awful since Push Me Pull You 10 years ago. What's this episode trying to say? Bollywood exists? No one cares. It's all style, no substance. Anything that's style over substance is automatically crap.
I bet you automatically hate any episode that features Ashima.
You take that back!
Is it just me, or are you two becoming more childish every episode?
It seems that way. The only time they didn't even come close to arguing was, what, when we reviewed School Days? Remember that?
I thought this episode was just... there. I didn't love it, I didn't hate it, I just shrugged it off.
So, you're neutral towards it, Rachel?
Pretty much, Matt. However, the fantasy sequence has me split. I think it's cute, but it also rubs me the wrong way a little.
I just have no words to this episode. But I would think that one scene where Thomas rescued Ashima was quite funny, but that's about it really.
This episode. It's the worst of the entire show, and I thought I knew what a bad episode really was.
F you too, Ashima hater!
Hey! Knock it off, you two!
We've got 2 more episodes in here to go. Let's calm down and run through.
Yeah, anything to stop those two from bickering over the smallest yet stupid things all the time.
Thomas and the Monkey Palace.
Thomas takes a detour and encounters some troublesome monkeys.
And you fellas are so funny!
You have got to be kidding me.
Hooray! An episode that fits right at home in the Miller era! There's no way this episode's gonna be bad!
And in case you didn't know, that was sarcasm.
I do admit, the monkeys were quite cute, especially when one tried to steal Thomas's driver's hat. But there's not too much in this episode that's happening.
I agree with what Rachel had just mentioned. Those monkeys are cute, but yeah, this episode just feels like it has another boring storyline where the realm just plays no important part in it. Though, which international episode would I rank as the most boring more?
Unfortunately, this is another goddamn episode to feature the return of the goddamn free strikes formula. Seriously, goddamn this episode to hell!
Boring as monkey shit. Next episode.
Tiger Trouble.
Thomas and Rajit had a nasty encounter with some poachers. I kinda like this one. It does take on a risk most children's shows don't even try. The dangers of harming animals and the cruelty of poachers. After watching Bindi the Jungle Girl growing up, animals had become one of my passions, and it felt good to see Thomas and Rajiv bring the poachers to justice.
It was good that Thomas had managed to do something good for the animals and its environment for once. Them trying to capture those poor endangered tigers was just the lowest they could even stoop. Thank God they got caught in the end. The environment just doesn't need someone that threatens to change it or for its inhabitants.
I'll admit the episode wasn't bad, but it's still one I wouldn't want to watch again. I'll take Thomas Goes to Bollywood over it any day.
Well, I'll give Tiger Trouble this. At least it was better than the previous 2 episodes. So I guess it's the least bad one of the bunch? Well, this and I guess Trusty Trunky.
I'll be honest, I didn't care much for this episode when it first aired, mostly because I'd seen the Bollywood and Monkey Palace episodes, both of which leaving a bad taste in my mouth. But on reflection, mostly due to my rerunning of the India episodes with James and Thomas's place, Tiger Trouble actually isn't too bad. The story's better, the characters feel more like characters, except for Ashima and Noor Jahan, the latter of whom we know literally nothing about, but alas, the bar hadn't really been set that high, and it felt like the India batch redeemed itself too little too late.
Hey, blame the writers for shoehorning Thomas into every episode.
Well, I know a certain someone in our EC circle is going to be excited about our next batch of episodes.
Are they the Australian batch?
Yep, and there's only one way to introduce them. Hit it, man at work!
Outback Thomas.
Thomas tries to be a tour guide when Shane is unavailable. However, what?
Do a barrel roll, Matt!
Do I look like I'm piloting an R-Wing from Star Fox 64 to you, Cam? Just get me out!
Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh! 4% set in my hometown, and I've been to Central Australia and came to the bush once. This will be amazing! I can't wait to do this! Let's get down to it now!
Well, Rachel, care to do the honours of starting the first one off?
Of course! During this episode, Shane shows off his tour guide skills and his witty charisma and jokes. Thomas wishes he could do that too, so he attempts to take out the coaches. However, things don't go very well when he ends up on a bridge. I really enjoyed this one. I especially like seeing the coaches interact with Thomas. I think they're wiser than the coaches we saw back in China.
Not to mention, one of them, Aiden, is voiced by the episode's writer, Tim Bain, which makes this the second time a writer voices a character in their episode. The first being Britt Allcroft as Lady in The Magic Railroad.
That's pretty neat.
As for the other, Aubrey, she's voiced by Genevieve McCarthy. I've actually contacted her once before, and she's been very kind.
Wow, that's cool, Mike.
Funny enough, I once got into contact with someone from the show, back in February 2017, that is. Namely, one of its voice actors.
You're talking about Jules De Jong, the US voice for Emily, aren't you?
You're right on the button, Mike. She's easily my favorite of the show's voice actors, and is currently, to my dismay, the most underused, too. Oh, and we can't forget that she was also the original US voice for both Mavis and Rosie, too. Anyway, I emailed her, and eventually got a reply back.
I don't have much to say that hasn't already been said. There are good international-based episodes. Outback Thomas is indeed one of them.
I think no one in that episode does the jokes better than Shane. I should know. I'm always full of jokes. Hey, does anybody else want to hear?
Not a good time!
Ugh, fine. Next episode.
But first, could someone please get me out of here?
Cyclone Thomas.
Ah, come on! Seriously?
Thomas becomes a hero when Isla is unable to fly through a cyclone. Now in this episode, we can see that a huge storm was sweeping across the length of the country. Probably maybe a sandstorm or something. But one thing's for sure, it nearly feels like that this is somewhat just like the Railway series story Thomas and the Hurricane, when a hurricane hit Sodor. That is, if anyone else remembers that book as well as I do.
Does anyone remember the season 10 episode, Thomas and the Jet Plane? Well, this episode is a bit similar to that in a way. Thomas is jealous of a plane, but when said plane can't help people during a storm, Thomas helps out in the end. But then again, we probably won't see Jeremy in a future episode anytime soon, save for a Trackmaster toy cameo in Letters to Santa back in season 20.
Oh yeah, I completely forgotten about that as well.
Yeah, the episodes are pretty similar, just set in a different country. There's an Edward's Exploit vibe I got towards the end with Thomas puffing away through the cyclone to and from Catherine, Australia. By the way, nice touch of using a real city.
I don't think I've been to Catherine, but I have been to Darwin, another place that's mentioned here. I think this episode is a really intense one. Cyclones are notorious in Australia, especially during summertime in the desert, and this episode showcased that really well. And I'm glad they did their research on the island of the cyclone as well. You may think it's calm, but it's a false sense of security.
Wow, that's very interesting, Rach.
Yeah, I'd love to learn more about your country, Rachel. I guess it would be worth to watch those Australian-themed episodes after all.
I know. It's so much fun seeing these places come to life in Big World Big Adventures.
Come on!
Well, I guess it's on to the next one.
Around here?
Banjo and the Bushfire.
Thomas helps out when a bushfire takes place, and Ranger Jill names one of the recently hatched baby crocodiles after him.
Oh my god, another episode with another character named Thomas? That's another kind of thing that the CGI series had overdone, and it just gets up to the point where it gets super old super fast. First they named one of the pigs Thomas in Thomas and the Pigs, and then a baby named after Thomas in Thomas and the Babysitter, and now a baby crocodile named after Thomas? Again? I mean, what's next? A city on Sodor named after Thomas? Screw that!
You know, there actually is a city named Thomas in West Virginia.
Actually, Thomas was the name of one of the 12 apostles in the New Testament, and he was a doubter. In fact, the name Thomas derives from the Aramaic word for twin. Wait a second, Thomas doesn't have a twin!
No, duh.
Well, aside from that, gentlemen, let's get into the rest of the episode. You think cyclones are terrible? Wait till you see the effects of bushfires. Now, some naturally caused fires can help the environment somewhat. They burn out dead plants and weeds that shouldn't be there, but when out of control fires get made by campfires and the like, it could harm everything in its path. Nearly grown plants and some animals may not get out of the way in time. There's one bushfire that pushed a school camp further back when I was in late primary school.
So I'm guessing bushfires are common in Australia too?
Well, when it's really hot. I also remember a little koala rescued from a fire too. Sam was her name. I guess that was the inspiration for rescuing a koala in this Thomas episode.
Wow.
This episode gives us the debut of Tamika the Steam Motor Rail, and quite possibly her only appearance in the show. Unless they do something with her in season 23, it's a crying shame because I actually found the idea of a steam rail motor interesting.
I thought the fantasy sequence was really funny in this episode, especially when Annie says this.
It's the fat croc truler!
Or, if you live in America, Sir Crockham Hat.
Oh dear.
Hey! I was supposed to be telling jokes here!
Kangaroo Christmas.
A real kangaroo mistakes a toy kangaroo for her Joey.
You know the song White Christmas? That doesn't happen down there. In fact, where I live, we hardly ever have snow at Christmas. Granted, we do get snow in January, February, or even March, but very rarely in December.
Yeah, it sucks having no snow back here in Britain. Though there was that freak snowstorm that hit my country not long ago. Ugh, it was a nightmare.
Well, that's very interesting. And here's something else. Two of my family went on a honeymoon after their wedding to America to get a white Christmas, and it didn't snow there either. Back on topic. This episode is really sweet. Thomas may have been disappointed that there was no snow, but he did help a little girl get a toy kangaroo back. One thing I do know, I haven't experienced animals kidnapping my soft toys. Unless you count my dog, that is.
I don't have too much to say about this episode apart from that. I will say though, that this is a very nice way to end the Aussie episodes and the international episodes this season.
One thing I can say is that I do like kangaroos. Truly one of the most elegant creatures in Australia.
Yeah, in conclusion, it's not perfect, but it's an episode you might want to check out over the holidays.